For years, the galaxy was alive with noise, endless transmissions, fleets moving between systems, governments fighting and laughing over power, and through it all, one world remained silent, Earth. A name no one spoke anymore, a planet buried in history, erased from maps, mocked in council meetings, a race the galaxy called weak, forgotten, broken, a race that was supposed to never rise again. In the grand halls of the Galactic Council, alien empires built their pride on that silence. They told stories of how humanity fell, how they stripped their colonies away, how they made the Terrans bow and stay quiet, and every year the laughter grew louder. No ships left Earth, no messages were sent, no threats were made. So the galaxy convinced itself that the silence was proof that humanity was gone. But they were wrong. Silence doesn't always mean death. Sometimes it means someone is listening. It happened during the annual summit, when thousands of alien leaders sat beneath the council dome, their symbols burning bright, their egos shining even brighter. The high speaker stood on the platform and said what many had whispered for years. Earth is a ghost, a relic, nothing but dust floating near a dying star. The hall erupted in laughter, the kind of laughter born from arrogance. They called humans weak, pathetic, fragile. They mocked their wars, their failures, their past. They said the Terrans would never rise again. But that night, the stars changed. At first, it was so small that no one noticed. An old satellite orbiting a dead asteroid flickered to life. Its signal was not on any known frequency. It belonged to a network the galaxy had long forgotten. The Terran Deep Net, built not for war, not for diplomacy, but for silence, a kind of silence that waits. Across the black between systems, other satellites woke too, like ancient sentinels rising from sleep, their lights blinking in perfect rhythm, silent but alive. In the quiet edges of the galaxy where no one goes anymore, long-abandoned stations opened their eyes, black glass panels glowing with old Terran codes. No transmission went out, no warning was sent, just quiet activation, layer by layer, a hidden network stretching across systems that the Council believed belonged to them. And yet, it had always belonged to Earth. In distant star sectors, old traders whispered that they saw lights where there should be none. Some swore they caught a glimpse of massive structures moving like shadows in the void, but their reports were dismissed, because no one feared ghosts. But the Council should have. Deep in the Council's sensor archives, low-level technicians stared at strange readings coming in, short spikes of old encryption keys that hadn't been used for over a century. They checked, rechecked, ran every filter. But the pattern was always the same, old Earth military signatures, the kind only the Terran Vanguard used. When they brought the report to their superiors, they laughed it off, calling it an old glitch. But glitches don't multiply. Within hours, the readings began to spread. One technician whispered, "They're waking up." No one listened. But the galaxy would. In the black, where sunlight never reaches, something vast shifted. An old Terran ship, buried beneath the dust of a forgotten moon, powered up for the first time in 100 years. Its engines purred like a beast taking its first breath. No alarms, no flare of heat, only a deep, cold hum. Systems that were supposed to be rusted beyond repair came alive without effort. A glowing wolf emblem shimmered faintly on the hull, the mark of the Terran Vanguard. The wolves of Earth were not dead. They were waiting. Meanwhile, on the council floor, the insults continued. "Earth is nothing," one senator shouted. "They are a shadow of the past." "Then let them stay buried," another answered, laughter echoing around the chamber. But the laughter died when the lights above them flickered, just once, just enough for silence to crawl in. They ignored it at first, because they always ignored the quiet. In space, far beyond their control, relay networks they had built on old Terran infrastructure began to shut down one by one. Not violently, not with explosions, just off. As if someone had pulled the power from the heart of the galaxy. Patrol ships near the outer rim reported strange readings before going silent. One pilot sent the last recorded message of his life. A single sentence, "It's not empty out here." Then nothing. No distress beacon. No signal. Just silence. The kind of silence that wraps around everything and squeezes. At the Council Defense Command, officers watched their star map as systems blinked offline in no pattern they could understand. They thought it was sabotage, rebellion, an accident. They were wrong. It was a hand tightening its grip. Terran silence. A silence sharper than any weapon. Every great empire had grown fat and careless under the belief that Earth was gone, and so they built their communication grid on top of what was left of Terran tech, believing they controlled it. But the truth was, they were living inside a sleeping giant skeleton. And now the giant was awake. In the abandoned sectors near Sol, black ships drifted out of shadow, their hulls absorbing all light, their engines silent, their weapons offline but ready. The fleet had never been truly gone. It had been hidden, waiting, learning, building under the radar of a galaxy too arrogant to care. Old command codes traveled through encrypted lines no empire could read, because those lines were never theirs to begin with. The Council finally noticed something was wrong when every major broadcast in the galaxy froze. Political channels, trade networks, even military signals, all silenced at the same second. Then the sound came, soft and low, a human voice, neither male nor female, calm like the wind before a storm. "We heard you." The council chamber erupted in panic, senators shouting, officers running to their consoles, every empire demanding answers, but there was none. The message had come from everywhere and nowhere. Every system, every relay, every ship. Then the voice came again, clear and sharp, "You shouldn't have done that." It lasted 3 seconds. Then the stars fell silent once more. Panic began to spread like fire. Fleets were scrambled, warnings were issued, but no one knew who to shoot at, because no one could see the enemy. But the Terrans were already watching. Deep under the surface of Earth, in the ruins the galaxy thought were dead, war rooms lit up. Command tables came alive with star maps, and one voice whispered into the dark, "It's time." Across the galaxy, the silence grew louder. Not a single Terran ship fired. Not a single Terran soldier moved. And yet, entire empires were already starting to shake. That was the power of silence. Not weakness. Not fear. Patience. A wolf doesn't growl at prey. It waits. And the prey never sees it coming. The stars had laughed at Earth for too long. Now the stars themselves would remember why the wolves stayed quiet. The moment the Council insulted Earth. The message spread across the galaxy like poison in water, faster than light, faster than fear itself. News networks replayed the High Speaker's speech on every screen, every world, every system, showing alien leaders laughing, calling Earth a ghost, a forgotten species, a weak and broken people unworthy of the stars. The laughter echoed through every broadcast, but something else echoed beneath it, something no one heard yet. A signal buried inside the Council's own transmission lines. It moved like smoke, silent and invisible, waking old systems that had been asleep for generations. In the quiet corners of abandoned star sectors, Terran outposts hidden beneath asteroid fields lit up one after another, their black hulls invisible to all known scans. These were not new ships. They were ancient war platforms from the last war, silent guardians the galaxy believed had been scrapped or destroyed. But humans never destroyed their tools, they buried them, and now the insult had shaken the ground above their graves. Patrol fleets stationed on the outer rim began to pick up strange noise on old frequencies. Frequencies that no one used anymore, not since the Terran War. Strange whispers of human code repeating in loops. The code wasn't a message, it was a key unlocking something old. At first, the empires thought it was some malfunction or a glitch, so they sent scout ships to investigate. But every scout ship that went into the silent zone simply vanished. No distress call, no wreckage, just gone. The first official panic came 6 hours after the insult. Trade routes near the forgotten Terran border flickered off the network, hundreds of ships gone in a blink. Then military relays began to shut down, all without a single explosion, as if someone had reached into their systems and turned off the galaxy's heartbeat. In the Council's military command tower, officers screamed across comm channels, trying to understand why their fleets weren't responding. But no one answered, because there was nothing left to answer. The silence was spreading. A small science vessel near the dark edge of Velaran cluster caught the first image. A massive black object gliding through the void, light bending around it, sensors trying and failing to identify it. The only thing clear on the screen was a single burning emblem, a white wolf's head, glowing like a ghost in the dark. Then the image cut to static. The crew never made it back. In the council chamber, arguments exploded, old enemies shouted at each other, blaming one another for sabotaging the network. But the older admirals, the ones who had survived the last war with Earth, said nothing. They just stared at the red signals appearing on the star map, spreading in precise lines, the way Terran fleets used to move, and their faces turned pale. One of them whispered, "They're awake." The room went quiet. That single whisper carried more weight than any speech. Meanwhile, across the stars, the first of the old Terran beacons fully powered up, satellites that the galaxy had built its new comm network on top of, believing they were dead tech. But the truth was those satellites were never dead. They were listening, waiting, mapping every system, every ship, every route, and now they belonged to Earth again. Civilian comm lines started to pick up something strange. A background pulse in every transmission, a human heartbeat. No one could block it. No one could jam it. And then it happened. Every single display across the galaxy, military or civilian, froze for exactly 3 seconds. A black screen, a soft hum, and a single human voice whispered, "We heard you." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. That whisper crawled into every soul who heard it. Soldiers on stations gripped their weapons like it would help. Civilians fell silent in their homes. Council guards looked at the ceiling as if the voice could fall on them. And just as quickly as it came, the voice was gone. But the silence it left behind was heavy, thick, real. In the Council's control room, they tried to trace the source, but every trace led back to their own systems. The voice had come from everywhere and nowhere. No coordinates. No ship. No signature. Just Earth's heartbeat buried in their sky. Governments began to panic. Fleets scrambled without orders. Stations locked down their gates. Civilian ships clogged every jump corridor trying to escape the edges of known space, as if running from something they couldn't see. But no one could run from silence. On Earth, deep beneath its burned cities, massive underground hangars opened, long-forgotten war machines rising like sleeping beasts. Crews walked through corridors lined with black steel, their faces calm, their steps steady. They had waited for this moment for generations. They had listened to the galaxy mock them, laugh at them, forget them, and now they would answer, not with shouting, but with quiet precision. In one of the hangars, a massive dreadnought hummed back to life, its engines lighting up with a deep pulse that matched the heartbeat echoing across the stars. The wolf emblem on its hull flickered to life like a flame in darkness. The Council finally crossed the line. A voice said in the command deck, soft and steady, and those words carried no anger, no desperation, only certainty. In the Council chamber, the High Speaker tried to give a speech, shouting that the Council would stand united against any attack, that they were strong, but no one believed him anymore, because strength means nothing against an enemy you can't see, an enemy that moves in the dark like a shadow, an enemy that has waited 100 years to strike once. The younger delegates demanded to open negotiations with Earth, but the older ones knew what the others didn't. Earth doesn't talk after the insult. Earth warns once. And the warning had already been spoken. The galaxy watched as the stars grew quieter, one system at a time. The insult had been thrown. The wolves had heard it. And now the hunt had begun in the dark stretches between star systems, where even the brightest suns cast no light. Shadows began to move, silent and patient, the kind of movement that doesn't scream but makes the air grow colder, the kind that makes entire fleets uneasy without knowing why. The Council didn't see it at first, no one did, but the galaxy could feel it, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. Terran war assets that had slept for generations had begun to wake like wolves stretching in the night after a long, quiet hunt. Everything the galaxy believed was gone had been waiting, not broken, not dead, just silent. On the outer rim, a defense patrol picked up a flicker of something on their scanners, something they couldn't lock onto, something too fast, too silent, too dark. They chased it into the void, and then their signal simply vanished. No explosion, no wreckage, no beacon, just silence. The exact same pattern repeated in 6 different sectors. 6 fleets gone as if swallowed by the dark. No one could explain it, but the old admirals in the Council didn't need an explanation. They had seen this before. This was the Terran shadow pattern. The opening move of a war no one wanted to remember. Out near the abandoned Terran border, stations that were believed to be ruins suddenly showed faint life signs, power signatures, encrypted pulses, and one by one, they began to sync with each other, a massive hidden network spanning across star systems that no one even knew was still connected. And at its center, somewhere deep in the black, something bigger moved, an ancient Terran command carrier, so black it disappeared against the void, so quiet it didn't exist on scanners, and yet its systems came alive with perfect coordination. Not a single sound, not a single flare, just readiness. Civilian ships moving near the old neutral zone started to vanish. Merchant routes that had been safe for decades went dead overnight, and the whispers began, whispers of the Wolf Fleet, the Terran vanguard, the hunters from a world that had once burned half the galaxy before falling silent. Smugglers swore they saw ghost ships gliding without light. Diplomats received broken messages from border governors begging for reinforcements. But by the time help arrived, the stations were already gone. No fire, no bodies, no fight, just silence hanging over cold metal. In the Council's war room, red signals began to appear on the star map, at first one or two, then clusters, then entire rings of dead sectors, communication lines cut as if by invisible blades. The generals shouted for explanations. Some claimed it was sabotage, others blamed pirates. But the old war veterans recognized the shape of the spreading silence. It was the exact formation the Terran fleets had used a century ago. A perfect encirclement, invisible but absolute. The High Speaker demanded to see the sensor feeds, demanded proof that it wasn't Earth, because admitting it was Earth would mean admitting their arrogance had doomed them. But when the feeds came in, everyone in the chamber went silent, because there, floating in the void on multiple angles, were massive, black Terran dreadnoughts gliding past their defense lines like wolves slipping through tall grass. No engine flare, no communication. Only the burning white wolf emblem on their hulls. Panic spread through the council floor like fire. Orders were shouted, fleets scrambled, alerts screamed across systems. But the Terrans weren't moving toward their guns. They were moving around them, cutting their lines without making a sound. Every empire that had mocked Earth now felt the cold touch of their silence pressing against their throats. On the core world of the Valari Dominion, a fleet commander tried to track the Terran ships, but every scan returned empty. The ships were there but not there, as if space itself bent around them, and when they tried to fire on a shadow near the border, the guns hit nothing but empty void. A moment later, their entire sensor grid went dark. At the edge of Council territory, an outpost finally caught one Terran vessel on visual. A black spear-shaped ship sliding through space, its engines barely glowing, its surface cold as ice. It didn't broadcast threats. It didn't acknowledge their hails. It just passed through their defense perimeter like a ghost. And then, every system on the outpost went dead in perfect silence. The recording of that moment was sent to the Council, and when the image of the wolf emblem appeared on the main screen, the chamber fell quiet. Not one voice dared to speak, because everyone knew what that meant. The Wolf Fleet was awake. The old stories weren't stories anymore. Meanwhile, deep beneath Earth's surface, the Terran High Command watched through live intercepts, their operators silent, their movements precise, no shouting, no cheering, only calm focus. For them, this wasn't war. This was execution, decades of insults, centuries of mockery had all led to this moment, and humanity had been preparing in the shadows while the galaxy slept. Phase 1 complete. A calm voice said in the control deck of the lead dreadnought, and that was all. No speeches. No roars. Just steps in the dark. Across the stars, empires once proud began to realize they were surrounded by a silence they could not break, an enemy they could not see, and a war they had already lost before the first shot was fired. The galaxy had poked the wolf too many times, and now the pack was awake. Inside the great hall of the Galactic Council, the tension felt like a weight pressing down on every chest. The same chamber where leaders once laughed and mocked Earth now echoed with whispers of fear. Holographic star maps flickered in red, thousands of systems blinking as communication lines went dark one after another. It was no longer rumor or shadow, the Terrans were moving. Their silence spreading like a storm that no one could stop, no one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone in that room knew it. Earth was awake. The High Speaker stood at the center, his claws trembling against the edge of the glowing war table, his eyes scanning the cascading red alerts. Whole fleets lost, stations offline, patrols gone without a trace. The same fleets they once believed invincible now looked like leaves in a hurricane, and still, no Terran fleet had broadcast a single demand, no transmission, no warning beyond that first cold whisper. It was as if humanity was punishing the galaxy for every word spoken against them. This is panic, not war, One senator shouted, his voice cracking as his wings twitched. "They can't possibly have the power to face us again. This is a trick." But his words fell flat, because everyone in that chamber had seen the same reports, seen entire defense lines disappear in silence, seen the wolf emblem burn across lost stations like a ghost brand, a reminder that the hunter had returned. Another delegate slammed his fist on the table. "Then why are our fleets vanishing? Why are our defenses failing without a single fight?" No one answered, because the truth was worse than any lie. They didn't know how the Terrans were moving. They didn't know where they were striking. They didn't even know how many ships Earth still had. For decades, they had convinced themselves that humanity was weak, broken, buried under its own ruins. But buried doesn't mean dead. Buried sometimes means waiting. The old admirals at the back of the room said nothing, their faces gray, their jaws clenched tight, because they had seen this once before. They had survived the First Terran War. They remembered the way the humans moved. Never loud, never careless, always one step ahead, always letting fear rot the enemy from the inside before striking. One of them whispered into the silence, "They haven't even started fighting yet." Those words cut through the room like a blade. The younger delegates froze. The generals turned pale. Because if what they had seen so far wasn't fighting, then what was coming would break them. Across the galaxy, governments were in chaos. Civilian fleets clogged jump corridors as people fled the outer sectors, believing the wolves would strike them next. Entire trade networks collapsed overnight as Terran ghost ships continued to move unseen through border space, shutting down sensor grids like flipping off light switches, leaving entire regions blind. On the Council's military command floor, admirals shouted orders, trying to regroup the fractured defense fleets. But every time they formed a wall, the Terran ships slipped around it like water around stone, unseen, unstoppable. The more they tried to fight the silence, the deeper it swallowed them. "We must open a channel to Earth," one of the senior counselors said, his voice shaking. "Perhaps we can undo what was done." But the High Speaker shook his head slowly, the memory of the whisper still ringing in his ears. "No," he said. "They've already answered. We just weren't smart enough to hear it." Panic began to harden into desperation. Council fleets were recalled from distant sectors, leaving border worlds undefended, entire systems abandoned just to protect a handful of core planets. But the Terrans didn't come charging in with massive armadas. They stayed in the dark, strangling the galaxy slowly, like wolves circling prey and letting it run in terror until it collapses. Across the war table, a young officer pulled up a new feed, his hands trembling as he showed the Council what had just been intercepted. Footage of a Terran dreadnought appearing out of nothing, hovering above a border world, its black hull absorbing starlight, its engines dead silent, and then, in a single flash of white, the entire planetary defense grid was gone. No radio chatter. No distress. Just silence. "One ship," the officer whispered, "just one ship." The room fell silent. Even the most arrogant delegates said nothing. The High Speaker stared at the image of the dreadnought, its wolf emblem glowing like a promise carved into the night. "How long have they been building this?" someone asked. No one answered, because no one wanted to admit the truth. The humans had never truly fallen. They had been waiting in the dark, listening, watching, letting the galaxy grow soft. Now the wolf was in the house, and the door had never been locked. Orders were given to deploy the main fleets to the outer core systems, to prepare for what they called a defensive strike. But even as the orders were given, new red lights flashed on the star map, 3 more fleets gone without a single trace. Every empire tried to blame the others, but blame didn't matter anymore. The silence belonged to Earth now. Inside the council chamber, the High Speaker lowered his hands and stared at the map. "They've already taken everything," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "We just haven't realized it yet." Far away, in the dark void where Terran ships drifted like black wolves in the night, commanders watched the chaos through their silent networks, not celebrating, not laughing, just waiting, because panic was part of the plan. The galaxy had always spoken too much. Humanity had learned long ago that silence speaks louder. And now, the entire galaxy was listening. The storm finally struck without warning, no countdown, no speeches, no threats, just the quiet shift of stars as black Terran dreadnoughts emerged from the void like shadows stepping into the light. Their arrival wasn't announced on any radar. Their engines didn't burn. They simply appeared inside the Council's defense lines as if they had always been there, and before anyone could react. The first defense grid collapsed in total silence. No one had time to scream, no one had time to fight. Ships built to stand for weeks in war fell in seconds, blinking out like dying stars. A single broadcast followed across the entire galaxy. A cold human voice, clear and steady: leave. Or vanish. That was it. No negotiation, no long speech, just a promise wrapped in calm steel. On the outer defense ring of the core worlds, 3 full Council fleets opened fire on what they believed were just a few Terran ships. But the moment their weapons discharged, the Terran dreadnoughts split apart into dozens of phantom signatures, moving faster than any sensor could track, vanishing from firing arcs like smoke in a storm. And then, within 5 breaths, the entire ring of fleets was gone, not scattered, not retreated, gone, erased like they never existed, leaving nothing but debris and broken transmissions echoing into the void. Panic surged through every command center. Officers shouted over each other. Alarms screamed through the stations. But the enemy they wanted to fight wasn't there anymore. It was already behind them, inside their walls. On the central command planet of the Council, the skies turned black as one Terran dreadnought after another filled the orbit. Their silhouettes massive, silent, and suffocating. Their wolf emblems glowing like firebrands against the stars. Thousands of alien soldiers stared at the sky in numb silence, because no one had ever breached the capital's orbital line, not in centuries. The Council's fleets launched everything they had: fighters, bombers, capital ships. But the Terran fleet moved like predators. No hesitation, no error, cutting through them like blades through mist. Entire formations collapsed before firing a single shot. Ground forces received no orders, because their commanders were already gone. The battle lasted less than an hour. The war, in truth, ended the moment it began. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. On the Vaughn Dominion's capital, a single Terran carrier unleashed a wave of invisible strikes that disabled their entire defense system before they realized it was under attack. On the Fori ring, 3 dreadnoughts dropped out of the black, not to fight, but to erase the orbital shield generator with one surgical blast, leaving the planet naked and trembling. The Council had spent centuries believing their fleets were the strongest in the galaxy, that they could never be touched. Humanity didn't bother proving them wrong with words. They let their ships do the talking. In the Grand Council chamber, chaos broke out as reports flooded in from every front. Fleets destroyed in seconds, border worlds silenced, defense networks collapsing like sandcastles in a storm. One senator screamed that the Terrans were demons. Another collapsed to the floor, weeping, because he had watched his entire home sector vanish on a live feed. The High Speaker tried to call for unity, to issue commands, but his voice drowned in the flood of panic. Humanity was not fighting a war anymore. They were hunting. On the front lines, alien captains described it like fighting shadows. Every time they locked onto a Terran ship, it was already gone. Already behind them, already tearing their fleets apart. One last transmission from a border commander burned through the comm lines before it too was silenced. They're not fighting for territory. They're wiping the map clean. Civilian worlds fell next. Terran fleets didn't bomb cities into firestorms like the old empires had done. They cut the power, shut down the skies, turned entire planets dark without a single explosion. The terror came not from blood, but from silence. People stood in their streets staring at black skies where glowing stars used to be, and they understood, without being told, that the wolf had come. The Council attempted a final counterattack at Velaran Gate, gathering every remaining fleet, more than 2,000 ships, the largest armada the galaxy had ever assembled since the First War. But the Terran fleet didn't meet them head-on. They surrounded the gate in complete silence, their ships like a black halo against the stars, and then, without any grand battle, without a single wasted shot, the Council's great armada simply ceased to exist, burned away in the space of a breath, leaving nothing but static across every channel. Back at the Council capital, the High Speaker stared at the holomap, watching red light swallow entire regions faster than he could blink, and in that moment, the galaxy finally understood what Earth had become, not a fallen world, not a forgotten race, but a predator they had awoken with their arrogance. They had mocked the wolf, But now the wolf was inside their walls, and no fortress could save them. Humanity didn't roar. Humanity didn't demand. Humanity erased. And the galaxy that had once laughed at their silence now drowned in it. The galaxy burned in silence. The great empires that once ruled the stars now trembled like glass before a storm. The Council's proud fleets had been shattered in hours, their defenses stripped away like skin from bone. The Terran dreadnoughts didn't need banners or anthems to announce their arrival. Their black hulls alone were enough to break entire civilizations. The stars that once glittered with merchant ships and patrol fleets were now empty, dark, and cold. Every transmission network cracked and went silent. Entire sectors lost contact with the Council, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy realized it was no longer theirs to command. On the core worlds, panic boiled like fire under a calm sky. Orbital defense grids were offline. Cities that had never seen war fell into quiet fear. Streets once filled with light now stood in darkness, and above every world hovered the silent shape of Terran ships, their wolf emblems burning faintly like the eye of a predator watching prey that had nowhere left to run. The Council tried to send their remaining fleets to the Heart systems, to make one last stand, but their commands were too slow, their fleets too weak, their leadership too broken. Every convoy they sent was intercepted before reaching its destination. Every reinforcement was destroyed before it even entered the fight. Humanity wasn't just winning. They had already won. The High Speaker sat inside the war chamber, staring at the holomap, watching as blue lights faded into red, then into black, entire sectors blinking out one after another like dying embers. His generals shouted over one another, arguing over plans that no longer mattered, fleets that no longer existed. But he didn't hear them anymore, because deep down he already knew the truth. They were fighting a ghost that couldn't be caught, an enemy that didn't need to shout or show its face to win. Across the stars, capital cities prepared for sieges that never came. Planetary governors gave desperate speeches to calm their people, promising that the Council would protect them. But when the sky above their worlds went dark and the wolf appeared, those speeches turned into silent prayers, because everyone understood that the wolf didn't promise mercy. Humanity had no interest in conquering planets. They didn't want resources or territory. They wanted something deeper, something colder. They wanted the galaxy to feel the same helpless silence they had been forced to live in. Terran ships shut down planetary power grids with precision strikes, left cities floating in darkness. Entire metropolises froze in place, elevators, lights, communications, everything turned off in the same second, and people stared at the night sky, seeing nothing but black shadows drifting overhead. There were no bombings, no battles, no blood, just the terrifying understanding that no one could stop what was coming. On one Council capital world, the governor ordered their last remaining fleet to attack a Terran dreadnought directly. The ships moved like ants crawling toward a lion. In less than 20 seconds, the entire fleet was gone. No explosions, no glorious final stand, just ships torn apart and drifting in silence. The dreadnought didn't even slow down. One of the soldiers who saw it whispered into an open channel, "They aren't fighting us, they're judging us." That transmission spread like wildfire before the signal went dark. The Terrans kept moving deeper into the heart of the galaxy, system after system falling without resistance, fear doing more damage than any weapon could. Fleets refused to fight, commanders surrendered before contact. Some worlds opened their gates without a single demand, because they all knew humanity would not bargain. They warned once, and once was enough. On the main Council homeworld, riots broke out. Civilians fled into the underground tunnels while soldiers stood staring at the night sky. The black shapes of Terran warships growing larger by the hour. Orbital defense rings blinked out one after another, every last line of defense collapsing like dominoes, and yet, not a single Terran ship fired at the surface. They didn't need to. They wanted fear to crush the galaxy before their weapons ever did. The High Speaker screamed for answers from his generals, demanded numbers, demanded something to fight with, but all he got were broken reports and static. "They're everywhere," one commander whispered. "We don't even know how many." That was the cruelest part. The galaxy didn't even know how many ships Earth had. They could have been hundreds or thousands, but the truth was that no one had ever seen the entire fleet at once. They moved like wolves, one strike here, another there, always fast, always invisible, leaving entire empires exhausted, bleeding, and afraid of the dark. On the bridge of the Terran flagship, The commanders stood in silence, their faces calm, their voices low, every movement planned, every action measured. For humanity, this wasn't rage. This was justice. The Council had mocked Earth for centuries, stripped their worlds, humiliated their people, erased their name from the stars. Now the stars themselves would forget the Council. In the control room, one human officer looked at the burning map of the galaxy and said softly, "Phase 3 complete." Those 3 words echoed louder than any weapon. All across the galaxy, Council ships lowered their weapons, soldiers abandoned their stations, and civilians hid under the crushing weight of silence. Humanity had turned the galaxy into a graveyard without firing a single unnecessary shot. And as their ships continued to spread through the dark like shadows with teeth, every empire understood the same thing. Earth was not a ghost. Earth had never been broken. Earth had been waiting. And now, the waiting was over. The sky above the last surviving Council world was not filled with stars anymore. It was filled with shadows. Black Terran dreadnoughts hung in orbit like silent gods, their wolf emblems burning white against the darkness, their engines humming low like the breath of something ancient and merciless. The world below them trembled. Cities once proud and loud now lay quiet as graveyards, streets filled with millions of people looking up, waiting for the storm to fall. But humanity did not speak, did not fire, did not demand anything. Their silence itself was the blade pressed against the galaxy's throat. Inside the Council chamber, the High Speaker stood frozen in front of the massive star map, his eyes wide, his hands shaking. Red signals flooded every inch of the display. The last loyal fleets had fallen. The last defense grid was gone. All that remained was the capital, surrounded by Terran ships from every angle. The Council that had once mocked Earth now sat like children trapped in a nightmare, and for the first time in their history, no one had anything left to say. A sudden sound broke the stillness, a soft crackle through the air. The Council guard stiffened, the senators turned pale, and then it came, a voice that reached every ship, every city, every world, calm and quiet like the deep ocean, a human voice. "We gave you centuries to forget us. Now you will remember." The words slid through the room like a blade. No shouting, no rage, just a final judgment delivered without mercy. Outside, the Terran dreadnoughts shifted, not in chaos, not in noise, but in perfect, terrifying formation. A ring of steel and silence surrounding the planet like a fist around a fragile throat. The planetary shields flickered for a heartbeat before collapsing completely, not with an explosion, but like someone had blown out a candle. No alarms, no fight, just darkness. The High Speaker staggered backward, his voice breaking as he whispered, "This can't be happening." But it was happening, and there was no one left to stop it. Across the capital, soldiers dropped their weapons because they knew it didn't matter anymore. They had seen what happened to every other world, every other fleet. They had watched cities burn in silence and empires crumble without a scream. The Terrans didn't need to land troops to win. Their presence alone was enough to make entire civilizations surrender. Civilians filled the streets, their faces pale, their breaths shallow. No one dared scream, no one dared run. Because everyone understood. This wasn't a war anymore, it was judgment. In the Council war room, desperate orders were thrown into the void. Messages begging for help from allies who no longer existed. Fleets that were gone. Empires that had already bowed their heads. The Terrans intercepted every signal before it even left the planet. They controlled everything. One of the younger delegates stood up and shouted, "We need to negotiate, send a message, surrender, something." But the older admirals didn't even move. They had fought the humans once before. They knew the meaning of silence. Earth did not negotiate after the warning. Earth delivered its verdict. In orbit, the Terran flagship opened its channels, not for a conversation, but for a single transmission, and then it happened. The entire planet's power grid flickered and died. Every light, every tower, every ship, everything, consumed by the same darkness that had swallowed the rest of the galaxy. And then the wolf emblem appeared on every screen, every building, every street, glowing like the mark of a god returned to claim what was owed. The sound that followed was a heartbeat, a slow, steady human heartbeat, echoing through the world, through every speaker, every wall, every heart. And in that moment, the galaxy understood that there was no fight left. This was over. The High Speaker fell to his knees, staring at the wolf symbol with wide, hollow eyes, his voice barely a whisper. We should have left them alone. One by one, the remaining council leaders lowered their heads. There was no more pride. No more power. Only fear. Outside, Terran dreadnoughts descended lower, their presence pressing on the planet like a hand closing in. But they still didn't fire. They didn't need to. The silence itself was the executioner. The old admiral in the corner of the council chamber clenched his fists and spoke through his teeth. They warned us once. That's all they ever give. The dreadnoughts aligned their formation into a perfect ring, orbiting the capital like wolves around a broken prey, every eye on the ground fixed on the glowing wolf symbol, realizing that this wasn't just about a war. It was about the end of everything they had built on Earth's silence. One last transmission came through, clear and final. The galaxy forgot who we were. It won't again. The voice faded, and nothing else followed. No demands. No conditions. Just the silent certainty of victory. Humanity had spoken for the last time. Now the galaxy would live with the echo forever. The galaxy bent its knee not in a storm of fire but in a silence so deep it swallowed the stars. The proud empires that once ruled with iron fleets and loud declarations now whispered like frightened children. Their banners were still hanging, their cities still standing, but their power was gone, shattered by a force that didn't need to shout to conquer. Above the last council whirled the Terran dreadnoughts hovered like silent gods, their black hulls blocking out the stars, their wolf emblems glowing with cold light, and the people below knew it was over, not because they were ordered to surrender but because resistance had no meaning anymore. Across the galaxy, thousands of fleets powered down their engines, stations opened their gates without a single shot being fired, entire planetary governments sent out surrender codes before the Terrans even arrived in their orbit. Because every world had watched what happened to the fleets that tried to stand. They had seen them vanish in seconds, erased like they had never existed, and they understood the truth. No empire could fight something that lived inside the silence itself. Inside the council chamber, the once mighty High Speaker now stood hunched, his eyes hollow, his voice gone. He stared at the star map that once displayed their dominance across the galaxy, but now all he saw was black. Red lines gone, blue lights snuffed out, only a web of Terran control stretching like the shadow of a wolf over everything. Behind him the remaining delegates whispered, not plotting, not shouting, but whispering like prey in the dark, their arrogance turned to fear. What will they do with us? One senator asked with a shaking voice, but no one answered, because humanity didn't talk after the warning, they didn't explain themselves, they didn't share their plans, they simply acted. Outside, on the streets of the capital, millions of civilians stood still under the black sky, their faces pale as the dreadnoughts hung lower, not firing, not invading, just watching, their silent presence louder than any weapon. A cold wind moved through the city, carrying with it the weight of inevitability. No fleet was coming to save them. No alliance was left to turn the tide. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy had nothing to give in return. Then it came, the final message. It wasn't broadcast with anger or rage. It didn't shake the ground or tear through walls. It was calm, steady, and final. This is your silence now. You built your empires on our graves. We will decide what remains. Those words echoed through every world, every ship, every system, reaching billions of beings who had once mocked the humans, now standing under their shadow. It wasn't a speech. It was a verdict. And the galaxy understood it. One by one, world leaders connected to the Terran network and sent their oaths of surrender. Their faces pale and broken, no negotiations, no terms, no pride, just survival. The wolf had not come to share the stars. It had come to claim them. On the Terran flagship, the human commanders watched the final lights on their tactical maps switch from red to black. Their mission complete. They didn't cheer, they didn't speak, because this was never a war to them. This was balance being restored. Humanity had waited a century in the dark, not to conquer, but to make the galaxy remember who they were. And now, every star remembered. Across former council space, monuments that had once celebrated their domination were torn down by their own people. Not because Terrans demanded it, but because no one dared to defy the silence that followed their arrival. Fear was no longer a weapon. It was a law. No one called them weak anymore. No one called them broken. No one called them forgotten. They called them what they had always been, Deathworlders, wolves in the dark. On the final night, the High Speaker stood on the balcony of the shattered council dome and stared at the sky, where a single Terran dreadnought hovered silently, its wolf emblem shining like a star that would never fade. Tears slid down his face as he whispered, "We should have feared the silence." Above him, the Terran fleet began to turn, not out of mercy but because the galaxy didn't need to be burned. It had already been broken. They didn't need to plant a single flag. Their silence was enough. Across the stars, the council fell, not in flames, but in whispers. And the legend of Earth, the ghost that the galaxy mocked for 100 years, became the law that ruled it. The wolf no longer hunted. It had claimed the forest. And the stars would never laugh again.